everyone, it's Karen. Thanks so much for joining me again today. I have got the most fun stamp set to share with you today. It's from Gerda Steiner. It's Meerkats on the Lookout, I believe it's called. And I'm making this sort of interactive card. Right here I'm using this one little meerkat that I wanted to have pop up behind the rocks. I'm just trying to make sure I've got his head just below the horizon. So that's that little pencil line I'm drawing there. I end up erasing that, but I just wanted to make sure that when I stamped out my meerkats on the right there that I have a horizon line for them. So I figured out where the front two were going to go, stamped those two in Copic friendly ink, masked them, and then I stamped the three in the background. I've left in my coloring. These are the color Copic markers that I used. I've just colored up one of these. I'm not sure if this is something you guys want to see or not, but I just thought I would show you how I colored one of these guys. I actually didn't do my best job on it. It's kind of hard to be sitting so far back from the paper so I don't get my head in the way. But I started off by using W3 and just kind of going over his body with that, just his lower body and a little of his head. When I googled meerkats, they're all kind of a grayish brown, beigey looking thing, a bit of white. So I feel like you could kind of play these up and mix them up a little. Some of them had darker paws, forepaws, some didn't. So I'm not sure if there's different species, but I think just have fun with them. So you can see I'm putting the E31 on. I also have used E53, and I think I like that one a bit better. I think it's a bit lighter than the 31, but for this video I had done the E31 for you, so see what you think. And that's W1. I'm just kind of softening out some of those lines, adding in a bit of shadow behind his neck. And then here's E40. It sort of blends out some of that the W markers and the beige as well, so I kind of like to use that one. And then I added in a few shadows with C2 and C0, softened those out with the C0, and you'll see that coming up here. Just kind of went where I thought there might be a bit of a shadow on him. You can see I'm pretty sloppy on this one. I think the others got a little better, but for this one I just found it quite hard to see from far back on my desk. I usually am sitting over top of my coloring, so I apologize for this one. And then for his eyes, they have very brown eyes, but I just found if I went right up to the pupil, it was kind of hard to see. So I've left that white line there. They don't really have that, but I left it just to help distinguish his eyes, you know, set the pupils apart. And then I blended that brown out with the W1. Really, these were quite simple little meerkats to color in. Because honestly, I don't think it has to be very precise. I think they're a real mix of color. And here I'm just using a black glaze pen for the nose and the eye. And I just repeated that with all of them. And you can see there I've got the other one stamped and colored up, and I masked off his arms and put a cupcake in them because he's got the birthday cake. Here I have horizontally, sort of jaggedly cut my Post-it note paper to make the horizon, and I'm masking off the meerkats. You can see how lazy I am. I didn't have a fifth mask and I didn't bother. I just was kind of careful going around that one little guy. But yeah, it would be better if I had masked him completely. It would be much easier. So this is tea dye Distress Oxide ink I'm blending on just to make the sandy bottom part of the card. And then I removed that Post-it note, and because I've cut them in half, the one up at the top you see matches perfectly. It lines up perfectly, so then I can do the sky. And I used Mermaid Lagoon Distress Oxide for that. I'm just using a small blending brush to go around the heads there because I didn't mask that fifth guy. So I had to be a little careful around him. And then I've used MFT's it's a cloud stencil. I can't remember if it's just called cloud stencil, but I use this quite frequently. It makes nice clouds that you can sort of mix and match and move around. So I'm just ink blending there and just finishing it off here. And once all that's done, then you can remove all the masks, which is the fun part. Until you notice that I didn't quite place my masks properly. So you can see that white line. So I'm just taking E51 Copic marker and I'm just going over where I missed. I didn't quite line those masks up properly, but it blends out really well. You can't tell afterwards, so that was okay. And there you can see, you can't tell. So here it's time to put this guy in, and so I've attached a strip of acetate to the back of his head, and I'm going to cover up his head. I want him to pop up from behind the rocks, so I'm just sort of positioning those rocks, kind of seeing what I want to do, and I glued just the middle part of them together. You have to be careful with these because he's got to pop up from behind them. Here I'm kind of measuring now where to cut my slit, and I wanted to make sure it would fit behind the rock. So his ears, I think, are the widest part, so you want to make it at least as wide as his ears. And I just used my T-ruler and X-Acto knife to cut that slit. And I like to kind of run my knife along that just to make sure it's easily opened at the edges and wide enough. I think my knife was pretty dull when I did this. I've put a new blade in and I don't think I would do that with my new blade. I'd probably cut my paper apart. So I'm just threading that meerkat through, and he should pop through, and I just sort of go up and down a little bit just to make sure he can come in and out. And you can see there, he needs a stopper. So I've just got a little strip of cardstock and I'm gluing that on. It doesn't actually have to be as wide as I've made it. It just needs to be wider than the slit. But I had this piece and I just stuck it on and it fits. So I've done that. So now he's stopped by the stopper. And now you need somewhere for the top of that strip to go back through just to keep everything in place. So here I am marking the width of the acetate strip. That's all you need there, just above his head. His head won't come up any further because of the stopper that you've put on him. And now you thread it through from the back and again through to the back. And I'm gluing the rocks on now to cover that bottom slit, and you can see I'm only gluing the outside edges because you've got to let him move up and down. So just glue the outside edges. Now I've cut a few die cloud shapes and I'm going to do exactly the same to cover the top one, just gluing the outside edges, leaving the middle free for the acetate to move up and down in. And I had a few more of these clouds, so I stuck those on magically here. I did a lot of editing for this video. So there you can see he goes up and down, and he's just got this teeny tiny cupcake that I don't think he wants to share with all the others. Here I'm now gluing the card front down to the base, and you have to be careful not to glue or tape down any of these moving parts. So I just did a little bead of glue along the bottom, and I'm running my tape runner along here and just to the side of that piece of acetate. And I'm just moving it up to make sure it stays out of the way and sticking everything down onto my card base and putting that piece of tape back into the inside. So once I've got those on, I like to make sure that it still moves, that I haven't accidentally glued anything. And here are two more die cut clouds that I decided to use for the pull tab. So I'm just lining it up on the back, and on the front I'd already cut out the word pull and attached that so the recipient knows what to do with that. But you could stamp that on, you could write it on, it doesn't have to be die cut out or anything. And so there's the front of the card. It's a very thin card, there's no foam tape or anything, and that mechanism works really well. I felt like the right side was a little bit bare, so I have this Elizabeth Craft African tree that I have used quite a bit, and I just cut a branch out of that, and some, you can see those clouds are actually the same as the tree leaves. So I'm lazy. Here I am adding in just a little bit of accent to the sand. That's E35 and this is W5. Just random little dots all over just to make it look like little sandy lumps and bumps. And then I have YG17 and I just made a few little grassy patches. I don't know that there is that much grass in Africa where these meerkats live, but I felt like it needed a little something, so I just added that in. Kind of a very random pattern. And then finally, I have a sparkle, it's a jelly roll pen, and I just went over and it adds just a really pretty little shimmer. I forgot to say that I had already stamped the sentiments on the front, and I did that right after I did all the Distress ink coloring. So there you can see that little shimmer from the sparkle pen. And that's the card. And so this little guy pops up and he has that expression on his face like, oh no, I have to share my birthday cake. And it's such a tiny little cake he's got there. So I just thought that was cute. Thanks so much for joining me, guys.